The third generation of Pokemon, the 3 Hoenn games, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, as well as the 2 Kanto remakes, Fire Red and Leaf Green. When I think of childhood video games, this is the most recent series of Pokemon games that come to mind. When you compare these games to predecessors like Red and Gold, the contrast is stark. The Kanto and Johto games look very similar. While the Gen 2 games have obviously improved visually, especially Crystal version featuring animated sprites, which broke my 7-year-old brain, the Gen 3 games are on a completely different planet in the graphics department. For obvious reasons, the graphics are the most immediately striking difference, but this is far from where the changes and improvements stop. Despite these games being over 2 decades old now, they still look, play, and feel like a much more modern game. From the classic visuals, iconic music, and mechanics introduced that are staples of the series to this day, these games have stood the test of time. So let's talk all about why Generation 3 Pokemon holds up so well. Let's talk about the looks of these games in proper detail. Why is there such an enormous difference between the games? Well, it's a fairly obvious answer. Gens 1 and 2 were made for the original slate of Game Boys. The Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Pocket, and Game Boy Light. Revolutionary game consoles, absolutely, but still just 8-bit systems. Generation 3 released on the new and improved Game Boy Advance slate of Game Boys. The Game Boy Advance, Game Boy Advance SP, and the Game Boy Micro. These iconic handhelds are much more powerful 32-bit systems. Now, what does this mean? I'm not totally sure, but it's quadruple the bits. That's like 4 times the bits. Let's check out the sprites of the channel's mascot, Haunter, and compare. Now, the original Haunter sprites are total bangers. I mean, I used the red and blue sprite in my intro. The sprite perfectly encapsulates Haunter with its unnatural smile, deranged eyes. You can tell how much glee it takes in striking pure terror in anything unlucky enough to cross its path. The yellow sprite has been cleaned up and feels almost regal, like he should be wearing a crown, necklace, and rings. I like the Gen 2 sprites, but I don't think they're as creative. Much better back sprite though. The Hoenn and remade Kanto sprites are much cleaner and due to the more powerful system, have a lot more detail to really flesh the Pokemon out and improved animations that kind of serve as a form of character development almost for the Pokemon, letting them express their personality through a few small movements. I prefer the Hoenn sprites front and back. I just think the sharper, more pointed versions look cooler. And that's a big reason why I despise the 3D Haunters. All of them. Go back to sprites, Game Freak, because it's not just Haunter, it's all these Pokemon and more that have been totally robbed of their character and are now just weird oblong blobs. Obviously, it's not just the sprites that have been cleaned up and improved on, but literally everything is light years ahead visually. Buildings, forests, the water. This kind of pixel art featured in Gen 3 is timeless. To this day, people love a good pixel art game. I mean, look at Vampire Survivors. That was the catalyst for an entire genre of games referred to as survivor-likes. And the game is only a couple of years old, and Stardew Valley is one of, if not the most popular indie game of all time. And if you're like me and enjoy playing Pokemon ROM hacks, a lot of the most popular ones are made using Gen 3 assets because people to this day love how they look. Generation 3 introduced an absolute flood of mechanics and features that are now foundational pieces of the franchise. We won't go super in-depth into each of these because frankly there are a lot of them, but I'll give you a quick summary of the more important ones. If you're interested in learning more about any one of these, there's about 1 million videos on each of them that dissect them in ways I can never by people that are much more knowledgeable than I am. First and foremost, something that affects every single Pokemon from number 1 Bulbasaur to number 1025, Petulant. Abilities and natures.
Chlorophyll? More like borophyll. Right?
Each Pokemon now has an ability that can literally affect any aspect of the game. There are abilities that increase or decrease stats, abilities that will increase damage from certain kinds of attacks, and abilities specific to one Pokemon that make up their entire identity. Certain species of Pokemon even have secret abilities that usually require more work to obtain, but oftentimes have more powerful effects. There are also 25 different natures now, and unlike abilities, each individual Pokemon can have a completely different nature than others of the same species. So while one Zigzagoon might have an adamant nature, another could have a naive nature. Natures affect how much certain stats will increase by. There are a handful of what are called neutral natures, which don't affect stat gain at all. All the others will cause one stat to increase by 10% more and another to increase by 10% less. Double battles were introduced in this generation as well, adding a whole new layer of complexity and strategy to Pokemon battles. So much so that ever since they were introduced, double battles have been the primary format of official competitive Pokemon battles. The archaic DVs were updated to the more in-depth and customizable IVs and EVs, adding even more depth to battling. They also massively improved the PC system, brought in a move reminder, updated the berry system, and even changes that sound small but are actually really vital, like being able to read what a new move does before actually forgetting an old move to learn it, and even running. While things like the special attack, special defense split in Gen 2 and the physical special split in Gen 4 were really important changes that we needed, I think Generation 3 mechanics really modernized Pokemon and is why the game still feels so good to play. By the way, there are tons of Gen 3 mechanics I didn't mention, and frankly, to do this topic justice, you'd need an entire video dedicated to it, and there are some great ones here on YouTube if you want to know more. The music of a Pokemon game is just as important as anything else. Iconic route tunes that swell with adventure, the tracks that make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. And don't forget the nautical beats for sailing the high seas. Now, the Game Boy Advance is notorious for poor sound quality. This is amplified by the fact that basically all of the Mario and some of the Zelda GBA games, which are typically Nintendo's flagship franchises, are some of the worst audio offenders. Sometimes the sound of the Pokemon games can get a little wonky. Some people cite the famous trumpets of the Hoenn games, sometimes sounding a little off at certain moments, but never anything jarring, and in fact the redone music of the first generation, in my opinion, is an improvement across the board. Not strictly on the topic of the video, but while doing research I got sidetracked and looked a bit into just why the sound is so bad on this console. Well, it comes down to the sound sharing CPU cycles with the main CPU, instead of having its own. So when a game was more demanding to run, the sound card would lose priority to the CPU for the resources required, resulting in oftentimes screechy or muffled sound. The developers of the Pokemon games obviously knew this and managed to update the game in a big way visually by utilizing great art direction that was able to keep the demands of the game low enough so the sound chip also had enough power to deliver clear and pleasing audio. Check out the in-game map of the Kanto and Johto games. They look kind of similar, don't they? Both the regions essentially boil down to a square with a few cities in the middle. Now look at the Hoenn map, it's totally different. Part of it is that squarish shape with cities in the middle, but the center portion of the map ditches that philosophy and adds multiple paths of traversing the map stemming from the central city of Mauville that provides easy access to the entire landlocked portion of the game if you're unable or don't feel like flying. Not to mention the huge water routes to the east and south of the map. Some people say it's too much water, but this is a region featuring multiple islands. The whole idea of islands is that they're surrounded by water. Cities also have some really creative design choices. The cities of the first two series of games really don't have a wow factor to them. There may be interesting landmarks or buildings to check out, but generally they're just cities. There are some cities in Hoenn that do have that wow factor. Fortress City, for example, is a city whose residents all live in tree houses accessible only by rope ladders. Pacific Log Town is a small town in the middle of the water to the southeast you could easily miss, and the buildings in this town are all on rafts, with floating logs used as walkways to navigate the city. Finally, Sodopolis City is in the crater of the meteor that crashed into the earth, and you can only enter it via underwater tunnel or from the air. There's also an array of different biomes that keep exploration fresh and immersive. A sweltering desert, a swamp with tall, thick grass, and even a volcano perpetually spewing ash, which you can even collect and bring to a glass blower to make items for you. While exploring the region, you'll come across many large trees and bushes, as well as small holes and rock walls that a Pokemon who knows secret power can interact with and make a secret base for you that you can buy all sorts of decorations for. Frankly, the Kanto and Johto maps feel kind of flat and simple, which makes sense given the limitations of the hardware the games were made for. Hoenn feels alive. Despite being a 2D game, the way things like mountains are designed, combined with the idea of diving into the depths of the ocean, give the game a real sense of verticality. The exploration features combined with how the map is put together are an underrated aspect of these games and are just another reason people come back to them time after time. Generation 2 really introduced the idea of a post-game. There you had to defeat all 8 Kanto gym leaders who are extremely underwhelming, as well as a small fetch quest culminating in the fight with Red, the protagonist from the Generation 1 games. Exclusively in the Emerald version of Hoenn, however, features a proper post-game challenge, the Battle Frontier. The Battle Frontier is a large city with 7 battle facilities known as the Battle Tower, the Battle Dome, the Battle Palace, the Battle Arena, the Battle Factory, the Battle Pike, and the Battle Pyramid. While the Battle Tower is a classic battle format, the rest of the facilities are all different ways to fight. For example, the Battle Factory rents out Pokemon you use for its tournament, and the Battle Palace is where Pokemon battle by themselves as opposed to being controlled by you. Each of the facilities require you fighting your way up to what's known as the Frontier Brains, and upon defeating them, you'll receive a silver symbol. But that's not where it ends. Go back and do it again, facing even tougher challenges and brains using teams featuring incredibly powerful Pokemon, even legendaries, and earn gold symbols. Aside from the symbols, you'll earn BP for winning fights that you can use to buy rare and held items, as well as TMs that can't be found anywhere else. The Battle Frontier is largely regarded as some of the best Pokemon post-game content. People even now struggle with the Battle Frontier. You really need to fine-tune your team in every way to earn all 7 gold symbols. So research what Pokemon you'll need, as you'll need a variety of teams, make sure they have the perfect abilities and nature, min-max their IVs and EVs, and optimize their movesets, and maybe you'll have a chance at conquering the Battle Frontier. Not strictly post-game content, since you can do this during the story, but there are what's called Pokemon contests introduced in Hoenn. You use berries to make what are called Pokeblocks to maximize aspects of their condition. There are 5 conditions, which are cool, beautiful, cute, clever, and tough, and you'll participate in contests that are related to each of these conditions. Each move a Pokemon knows is also associated with one of these conditions, and they have different effects, from earning bonus points or hearts in the contest, which is what you'll need to win, to frightening Pokemon and preventing them from using a move in the round. Winning contests provides some small rewards, including decorations for your secret base. I never got into contests much, so I'm not a great resource for them, but there are plenty of great resources for contests all over the internet if you want to maximize your chances of contest supremacy. Modern games really need an in-depth, challenging, and replayable post-game, and Pokemon had that down in 2005. So just why does Generation 3 feel modern even today? Because it established the blueprint for Pokemon's future. It brought in mechanics that continue to define competitive and casual play. It crafted a world that's memorable and ambitious. And it wrapped it all in a simple but beautiful visual style with a soundtrack that never gets old. It's no wonder why ROM hacks and fan remakes are so derivative of Gen 3. While at this point Generation 3 is a certified classic, it really is the launching pad of modern Pokemon. So what's your favorite from this time in Pokemon's history? Defeating the Frontier Brains, master balling Rayquaza, putting those perfect final touches on your secret base? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed this dive into Pokemon history, like and subscribe for more Pokemon content of all kinds. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.